So what we've done here in this diesel truck was, when I was putting my fuel in there, I didn't have enough fuel to end up emptying out the whole gas tank and completely purging all the lines of regular diesel, right? So I had to actually put my fuel as close to directly into the engine as possible. So how we did that is we had to drain all the existing diesel out of the fuel filter system. In these diesel trucks, the fuel filter system is the last place the fuel goes before it's going put it directly into the fuel injectors. So we emptied it out, and then we put in the plastic diesel purely in there. And what ended up happening was the fuel pump pumped in regular diesel right into that fuel filter, and then the pressure of that regular diesel being pushed in pushed my fuel directly into the fuel injectors. So for the first, let's say, 5 minutes the truck ran, it was running completely off of my fuel, and after that it ended up becoming diluted out. But the point was that we did see that the engine did run, and interestingly enough, anecdotally, everybody around when we did run the truck off of the diesel, the plastic diesel as I call it, they said that for one, it felt completely the same to drive, and it sounded great. But also, interestingly enough, they said everybody said the exhaust smelled better than real diesel when real diesel was in there burning. And there is a science behind that, why they were saying that, and it does make sense. I'll explain that. So a part of plastic purification is desulfurization, meaning they remove the sulfur from plastic. Diesel has a sulfur content within it. But remember, so they remove the sulfur from plastic when they make it, right? If we turn that plastic into fuel, there's still not going to be any sulfur in that fuel. So sulfur is a known, molecule that can have quite an odor to it, but there was no sulfur in there. So when we burned that plastic diesel that had no sulfur, the exhaust is going to smell better because there's no sulfur dioxide or any sulfur emission at all in the exhaust. So that was why everybody was saying, oh, the exhaust actually smells better. And then on top of that, in the front of the truck where the plastic diesel was sitting, because it was getting hot in the engine, people were saying that, oh, the engine kind of had a more plasticky smell at the front. When you put diesel in the engine, you're running it has a diesel smell at the front, like a kind of warm diesel, and there was like a warm plastic smell at the front of the truck when we were running it, because plastics do have what in the chemical world we call aromatic compounds in them, and by the name of that aromatic, they have an aroma to them. So a part of the purification process of oils is what we call a deodorization process, and that is something that is more sophisticated. I wasn't able to do it at my house because, of course, ideally you wouldn't want your fuel to smell like plastic if you can remove it. Yeah. And you can remove it because actually in the crude oil refinement process, they actually deodorize the crude oil, because if you smell raw crude oil versus gasoline, you would see it's a huge difference. So something that's really cool about these fuels we make from plastic is, since they are nearly chemically identical to the already existing fuels in this world, every single technology and process that we have to distill, refine, and filter and clean our current fuels, we can use on the plastic fuels.
Wow, and the part that I really thought was amazing, I want to congratulate you on every feat that you've been making, every pillar, every step, every brick that you've been laying to get closer and closer to the vision. And I just want to congratulate you. And I want to thank you for your work, Julian, because I know that it's going to be life-changing and globally changing, environmentally changing for the population in the world. And, just like I asked you earlier, how excited you were when you made Mach 1, right? How excited were you that day when you were able to drive behind this plastic diesel fueled truck, man?
Well, that process of getting that truck, going back to what we were talking about earlier, about people only see the result. I had been working to get a diesel vehicle to test that fuel in for almost 2 years at that point.
Wow.
The process.
No one would let you use it? No one would let you use their car?
No, nobody let me use it. And in fact, the reason we were even able to get that truck is because there was an influencer from Florida. Her name was Rachel. And being an influencer, she did have just extra, I guess you could say, just the extra money to just, invest in this project. And she was like, I want to help you out. I want to get you this truck because I like what you're doing. And so she drove it up from Florida. just to help, because yeah, everybody around me that had diesel vehicles, nobody came up and wanted nobody wanted to bear, I guess, the risk of potentially, it not working. So it had been a 2-year process because, like I said, we make all three products: gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. But what happened was my Mark IV machine, about 3 4 months after making it, had an electrical fire that
Mm,
almost burned my parents' house. So they told me, and you can never run this at our house again. So
wow.
when the fire happened, I only had enough diesel left to run a car, not enough gasoline left, because I have a gasoline car. I would have gladly put it in my car day one. So then I had gone through the process of just trying to shop and find a diesel car on a limited budget for years and years, and then try to ask everybody I knew, like, who has diesels, and everybody I knew said, no, we're not going to let you test it on ours. So at that point, when we finally ran that truck, it was more of a relief than an excitement, because at that point we had already put the fuel into like a diesel go-kart engine, for example, and it
Okay.
ran. So I knew it was going to run. I was more nervous that it was just finally happening, and I was more of just relieved, like, finally we can get on to the next step. I can finally tell people, yes, we finally ran a truck, because up to that point people would always be like, okay, you ran a weed whacker, you ran a go-kart engine, can it actually run a car? And I was like, yeah, finally we can finally tell people, yes, we ran a car.
Yeah. Basically, like, there it is in your face. Ugh. You know what
Right.
I mean?
Yeah.
Super cool. I have to address this because you mentioned, the biggest concern so far about making this pyrolysis is like explosion and blowing. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but you had to leave the Mach 3 because of some type of flammable issue, right?
Yeah, my Mark III reactor was built out of a 55-gallon drum, and those are made out of very thin sheet metal. And the process of pyrolysis doesn't operate under much pressure. However, with microwave pyrolysis, since it heats up so quick, in the beginning you have a big burst of pressure. And when you load in plastic, if you load in any plastic while it's running, or if you turn the blades while it's running, there's a burst of pressure. And Mark III, being made out of that really thin sheet metal, when I spun the blades for the first time, a burst of pressure happened and it literally exploded right in front of my face.
Wow. Did you experience any injuries or anything like that?
The only injury I experienced was a piece of molten plastic flew out and landed somehow on the bottom of my foot, and it ended up burning my foot pretty bad. But fortunately for that, when it blew up, it blew the lid off, and the lid shot through my greenhouse and into a tree. But fortunately, I wasn't standing in the front, because yes, that would have been bad.
Wow. No, thank goodness. Thank God, those type of things make me believe in angels, and destiny, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, seriously, because if I was standing in the front, everything would be so different. Because even if I was still here, I definitely might have had an arm taken off.
Wow. So, speaking of like the precautions, going back to the parents, and obviously you're seeing as you get bigger into the bigger devices, it requires more heat, which becomes more flammable, which could be more dangerous. So, what are your precautions to like preventing more explosions? What are you kind of working on to kind of protect yourself and anyone working with the next marks and stuff like that?
Well, Mark III blew up because it was too thin of metal. Mark IV, I made it out of literal propane tanks that are designed to withstand 200 psi 24/7. So Mark IV did not have that problem. My next machine, Mark 4.5, once again, I'm building it out of propane tanks. We're not going to have the issue of the explosions. But when it comes to the, fire risk, electrocution risk, those things do go up as you get more and more power going in. And the only way to truly protect yourself from those things is you have to be in a good state of mind when you're working on it. You can't be frustrated and trying to rush it, or angry at it and trying to just force it. You have to be relaxed, and you have to be always cautious and take your time with it. It's so important because, for example, the microwave power supplies, you touch them once when they're on, and that could be the end of your life right there. They make that much voltage, just one touch.